Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. Glad to be back here with you tonight after a 2-week break. I actually was on holiday last week. I actually took my summer break at the end of summer, but it's good to be back. So the way that these webinars work, for those of you that are new here, you create them with your questions. And to do that, you're going to write your questions to me over here right over there on the bottom of the right-hand side of the screen is a chat box that you can write questions to me. I'll try to take as many tonight as I can. I'm never able to get through every one of them. And usually I'm not going to take more than one question per person, although sometimes I break that rule. For those of you that are new here, welcome. I'm glad to see some new faces. And those of you that are coming back again, it's good to see some familiar names on the list of people I have participating tonight too. And the way tomorrow morning, just so you're all aware of this, I am creating a recording of the webinar tonight. And that recording will be available to you tomorrow morning. I'll edit the recording up tonight after the webinar is over. So yeah, I have a little bit of a later night on Wednesday nights. And then I'll try to have it ready for tomorrow morning. So you should get an email from me somewhere between about 6 to 6:30 in the morning, Seattle time, which is Pacific Standard Time. So 3 hours different from you, those of you that are out in New York and on the East Coast states. So look for that in the morning. And then at the end of that email tomorrow morning will also have a link that you can sign up for the next webinar too. So this is the first of 3 webinars I'm doing in a row for September. And then we'll take a break again, and then I'll come back and do another set in October, probably 3 that I'll be doing in October as well too. So I think that's it for the background here. Tonight, you'll see that I'll be doing some sharing of resources on my computer screen, which essentially is I'll be sharing with you articles that I've written about Lyme disease in the Treat Lyme book. Many of you are familiar with my website called the Treat Lyme book. I also may show you some of the supplements that I recommend tonight as well too, although I usually don't try to do that too much. I will be talking in terms of generic names on the supplements, but later I'll show you my own supplement store so you can see what brands I carry of those, because I tend to carry what I consider to be really high quality brands, those that might have the better chance of working for you. So I'll give you an idea what those are too. Okay. All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take the first question. As I'm doing these questions too, for those of you that are watching tonight, you'll see that you can see the questions show up on the bottom of your screen. That also shows up in the recorded version, although it gets to be a little harder to read. So I will wind up reading these questions too, so that I make sure that everyone can hear them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So hi, Kathy. Let's see. I have Lyme and Bartonella with Parkinson's symptoms. Why do Parkinson drugs make my Parkinson's symptoms worse? Tremors and difficulty moving. Herxing also makes Parkinson's symptoms worse. Thank you. So Kathy, I'm not sure why it is that your Parkinson's symptoms are getting worse on those drugs. I just don't know that for sure. What I can share with you and everyone, when somebody has Parkinson's disease, one of the causes of Parkinson's can be Lyme, okay? That does not mean that everyone with Parkinson's disease has Lyme causing it, but for some people, it can be Lyme that causes it. The one thing, and then as part of any symptom that one has with Lyme, when you have a Herxheimer reaction, those symptoms can get worse. So it would make sense that your shaking and your tremors might get worse as part of a Herxheimer reaction, okay? So in Lyme disease, many of the symptoms that we have in Lyme are actually due to the immune system overproducing a group of chemicals called cytokines. And for those of you that have been to my webinars, you hear that word often. Those of you that are my patients know that I talk about those words often. But let me just talk briefly tonight about it so that if I use those words again, cytokines again, as part of the webinar tonight, you'll know what I'm talking about. So cytokines are made by white blood cells whenever they see an infection. And they're made by white blood cells to turn the immune system on. So increased cytokines made by white blood cells cause more white blood cells to be made. They draw those white blood cells to where the infection is, and they help those white blood cells work better. So that's all great, okay? The trouble is in Lyme, and also in some other infections like too many yeast living in your intestines, if you get yeast overgrowth in your intestines, what happens is the immune system may not do a good job, but it tries harder and harder. And eventually, and trying harder and harder, it overproduces the cytokines. So symptoms of too many cytokines can be sleep disturbances, hormonal dysfunction, fatigue, interference with how your thinking is, maybe even some relationship to tremors. Essentially, what we call Lyme symptoms are excess cytokine symptoms, okay? So now, if you start killing Lyme germs, what happens is the immune system sees those dead bug parts from the Lyme germs and it reacts by making more cytokines, okay? So what happens in a herx reaction is your underlying symptoms that are mostly cytokine related, because there's more cytokines, will get worse, all right? So one of the things that you want to do in terms of whether it's in Parkinson's or whether it's any reason that you have cytokines or Herxheimer reaction is I like people to take an antioxidant that comes from the Indian seasoning turmeric called curcumin. Curcumin gets inside of white blood cells and limits their cytokine production. The other thing that's very helpful in Parkinson's disease in particular to limit your symptoms and also limit the effect of a Herxheimer reaction is to be on other antioxidants, okay? So I would also get on glutathione, and I would do a liposomal variety, which means a microscopically wrapped in fat variety of glutathione. Glutathione is an antioxidant that's made in every one of our cells. In particular, it's made in large amounts in the liver and also in your nerve cells and in the brain, okay? Its role within our cells is that it's supposed to help repair damage, which would be great in the case of your Parkinson's. In the liver, it's used as the main detox chemical as well, too, but it's a strong antioxidant as well. And increasing your antioxidants in Parkinson's makes a big difference. So what I would do, especially if you're having increased symptoms quite a bit during your herxes, is I might consider doing a liposomal glutathione. And I would take about 400 to 500 milligrams 2 times a day. The product I like for that, because I think it has good absorption. They're coming out with some good studies showing that it actually does raise glutathione in your red blood cells and in the body, is a company called Research Nutritionals. And they make a glutathione that comes in a squeeze tube. It's a goo, an orange goo or a watermelon flavored goo called Trifortify. And they have 2, Trifortify Orange and Trifortify Watermelon. But you would do 5 milliliters twice a day of that, okay? All right. The other thing that in Parkinson's that's important to do is be on vitamin E, about 400 international units a day. The other thing I would do with Parkinson's is to be on coenzyme Q10. And there are studies that actually show that coenzyme Q10 at higher doses actually can make a difference in Parkinson's. And that is to use up to 1,200 milligrams a day, or to be at 1,200 milligrams a day. And though I like using a product I have here for that, it's called coenzyme Q10. It's a 400 milligram pill, and you would do 1 pill 3 times a day, basically, okay? So those are some things for you to think about, Kathy. And good luck to you on this, okay? All right. All right, so I'm going to just do a quick screen share here. Usually we'll do this later, but let me go ahead and show you now because I mentioned a number of products here. In the Treat Lyme book, I have written articles about cytokines and how to lower them. So you come over here and look at this Herxheimer and cytokines chapter. Okay, and here's my article on how you control cytokines, okay? And in here I talk even about glutathione. I talk about the curcumin. There's a similar article to this that I've written just about Herxheimer reactions called Herxheimer-Dioff reaction, inflammation run amok, okay? Now there's another article that you may be interested in seeing, especially if you have a lot of neurologic Lyme symptoms like a Parkinson's Lyme or a multiple sclerosis Lyme. Those are the things with a lot of neurologic symptoms. You may want to take a look at an article I have in the Brain and Nerves chapter. And it's called, somewhere here. I would take a look at this article called My Brain Isn't Working, I Think, What Can I Do? Where I talk about various things you can do to heal the brain, okay? And also this one called Glutathione, the Great Fixer, okay? You may benefit from ideas also that I have in the brain fog and Lyme disease. You can fix it, article that talks about how do you heal nerve damage in the brain. Okay. All right. So, one last thing then. All right. So this is, if you're wondering what products would I recommend to my patients, okay, what brands do I think are good quality brands based on what I see in terms of effectiveness in my practice, and also based on the chances that they're not going to have artificial fillers in that could hurt a person with Lyme. And again, be careful with your supplements. There's a lot of garbage out there, but there are some good quality products as well too. So in my store, I have looked to see what I think are good quality products. So if you want to see what those brands are, just take a look under my by manufacturer. These are the types of manufacturers I carry here, and I carry a variety of their products. Okay, so if you want to see, for instance, the glutathione that I carry, you just go ahead and type glutathione here. All right, and what should come up here is those the 2 Tri-Fortify products I was just telling you about right there. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and go back here. I think I'm going to go back here. Let's see. Hello, Deborah. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I started taking low-dose naltrexone about 6 weeks ago at bedtime. I'm up to 3 milligrams. I feel like I'm not getting good sleep. I even have vivid dreams. Is this common? Is this just effective taking it at different time of the day? Thanks. Okay. So, everyone, low-dose naltrexone is a drug called naltrexone, okay? And what makes it low dose is that it's manufactured by pharmaceutical companies at a 50 milligram dose. But when we use it as low dose naltrexone, we're usually going to dose it anywhere from 1.5 up to 4.5 milligrams a day. All right. And what the rationale is behind low dose naltrexone, naltrexone itself is a narcotic blocker. So like if you have people that have drug overdoses from narcotics or heroin, for instance, in the emergency room, they're given large doses of this to basically get rid of that overdose. So we we as people make our own narcotics, and they're called endorphins. So our natural narcotic system in our bodies are called endorphins. And the endorphins we make that regulate pain also regulate the immune system. Okay. And so if we can alter the endorphin levels in us, that might help with immune system function. So our narcotic receptors are called endorphin receptors, okay? And so what happens is if you go ahead and block an endorphin receptor in the body by taking naltrexone, the brain doesn't like that. The brain tries to maintain a balance, okay? So what the brain does is start sending out a bunch of signals to the endorphin-producing cells in the body and says, make more endorphins. So guess what? They make more endorphins. So then as the naltrexone wears away, those endorphin receptors get flooded with all these extra endorphins. And that can help re-regulate an immune system, in particular, an immune system that is attacking a person. So an immune system, an autoimmune illness, like rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune illness, for instance, or lupus is an autoimmune illness, okay? Now, there are 4 conditions for which we have science that says, limited science, but there's still science, that says that using low-dose naltrexone can help. And those 4 conditions are fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune inflammatory condition of the intestines, and Hashimoto's Graves' disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the other one, okay? So those are the 4 conditions for which we have science saying it can make a difference. Now, some people in their Lyme disease, the reason that they don't feel better with Lyme, that they keep having pain, they keep having fatigue, is that the immune system may attack you in Lyme. So for some people, what happens after they've had a Lyme infection is it triggers an autoimmune illness where the immune system starts attacking you. It's hard to say what percentage of people that is. I think it's actually a small percentage. A lot of the infectious disease doctors and their theories of what Lyme disease is contend that if you're not doing better after a month of antibiotics, well, guess what? There isn't any more antibiotics they're going to use. They think a lot of that is autoimmune illness, okay? I think they're wrong for the majority of people. But for some people, their Lyme is an autoimmune illness, okay? So I will use low-dose naltrexone, but I usually will use it only if I've got somebody that has an autoimmune illness for sure, like a rheumatoid arthritis with their Lyme, or a lupus with their Lyme, or an MS with their Lyme, or fibromyalgia separate from Lyme. I might use it for those kind of conditions, okay? The other time I will use low-dose naltrexone is I will try it if I'm about 9 months to a year into a treatment, and I've got somebody that's getting no improvements. I might wind up using naltrexone to see if maybe the reason the person is not getting better is it's turned into an autoimmune illness, okay? Now, we do not have a good test to say when somebody's Lyme is an autoimmune illness Lyme. We just don't have that kind of testing. So you would use the naltrexone as a trial. Now, the naltrexone, when I'm using it in somebody that is for their Lyme, I only, to be honest with you, find it helpful about 15 to 20% of the time. I don't think it is a universally successful treatment in Lyme disease, okay? So that's just the background on naltrexone. I've got a whole article written about it in the Treat Lyme book. You could just search for that. But then here's the point, Deborah. I know that's a long-winded response. So, Deborah, I just had to make sure that we all understood what naltrexone was first, okay? All right, so the thing about naltrexone is it's recommended, the standard prevailing recommendation that you'll read online and that a lot of doctors follow is to dose it at nighttime. And the problem with doing it, and I actually have people take it in the morning, okay? And the reason I have them take it in the morning is exactly the problem that you're having. A lot of people, when you dose your naltrexone at night, get insomnia from it, okay? And that can be overcome by taking it in the morning. Now, there is an opinion, and I hope you hear the word I just used. I said opinion, that if you use low-dose naltrexone, the only way it's going to be effective is if you take it at night. I so disagree with that. I think it has as great of a chance of being effective in the morning as at nighttime. I will tell you there are no studies that have been done saying that it's better at night than the morning. This is just some opinion that somebody came up with that has been perpetuated out there without any foundation to it at all. So I would take your naltrexone in the morning. If you can get your sleep adjusted by taking it in the morning, then you might even be able to get up to the higher dose, which is a 4.5 milligram dose, okay? The way I usually start my naltrexone is a person will start at 1.5 milligrams one time a day. I do that for 2 weeks. Then I go up to 3 milligrams, one pill one pill one time a day for 3 weeks, or for 2 more weeks. And then after 4 weeks, I think I'm confusing you. Let me start over again. So for the first 2 weeks, you do 1.5 milligrams a day. For the second 2 weeks, you do 3 milligrams a day. And then for the next 2 weeks, or after the first 4 weeks, after you're on the 3 milligram pill for 2 weeks, then you go up to 4.5 milligrams, okay? So basically you raise it every 2 weeks and you try to get up to 4.5 milligrams a day. All right? All right, good luck to you, Deborah, and thank you for that question. Hello, William. Let's see. Dear Dr. Ross, thank you for spending your time helping us out like this. You're welcome. Let's see. Do you find genetic mapping beneficial to determine which medication supplement should be taken, avoided? For example, avoiding Bactrim if you have the MTHFR mutation. So the only thing at this point, the whole genetic mapping thing is it's really early in its use and what our understanding is of it. At this point, I will do genetic testing for the MTHFR abnormality only. I know there are other abnormalities that can be detected when you do the MTHFR testing, but I don't find much utility in them. Meaning, for instance, you might have something called a CBS mutation, or you might have a mutation suggesting you can't handle sulfur containing supplements and antibiotics. But the trouble is with that kind of testing is all that testing says is you have a genetic predisposition to having the problem. It doesn't say you have the problem, okay? So the way our genetic material works is it provides a program. But after that program occurs, there's a lot of steps that take and translate it into whatever it's supposed to be translated into. And just because you have the genetic setup to have a problem handling a sulfur antibiotic, for instance, or sulfa antibiotic, for instance, does not mean you will have that problem, okay? So the only thing I do find helpful is looking at MTHFR, though. So MTHFR, everyone, stands for methotetrahydrofolate reductase. Boy, we use big words and confusing words in medicine. But what that is, that's an enzyme. MTHFR is an enzyme that is used in the conversion of diet folate into an activated kind of folate called 5-MTHF, which stands for 5-methotetrahydrofolate. That's another confusing word. So anyhow, just know that MTHFR converts diet folate to activated folate, all right? And that conversion of diet folate into activated folate is the first step in a bunch of chemical reactions that detox. And the end chemical that comes out of those detox reactions is glutathione. And I mentioned glutathione earlier tonight. It is the master detox chemical used by the liver to pull toxins out, okay? Now, to get glutathione, you have to be able to convert diet folate into activated folate, all right? And if you cannot do that, you don't get enough glutathione. And also, there's a bunch of smaller chemical reactions in here that lead to glutathione that also do a little bit of detox work too, and those aren't going to take place correctly either. All right, so there's two genes that we look at primarily in trying to figure out if somebody has an MTHFR defect. One is called the C677T gene, and the other one is called the A1298C gene, okay? And both of those genes have a mom component and a dad component, okay? So in our genetics, every gene we have, every genetic material has a part we got from our mom and a part we got from our dad, okay? So the people that have the biggest problem are people that have defects at both the C677T and the A1298C at both the mom and the dad positions, okay? But some people can even have a problem if they have just one defect out of those, okay? Now, so when I will think about correcting an MTHFR is in a person that has a lot of medicine sensitivities across the board. So they react to this medicine, they react to that medicine. That is a clue that you might have an MTHFR problem. And that's when I'll start looking for MTHFR testing. But again, I don't find much benefit in doing the other kinds of, pursuing the other kind of defects that a person might have, okay? So now if you do have an MTHFR defect, the correction is to take the activated folate, all right? So, and then the other thing that can help is to be on a methylated variety of vitamin B12 called methylcobalamin. I like using a product for that, actually has both of them in it. It's called Methylguard by Thorne. And I usually start a person at 1 pill a day for a week to 2 weeks. If it does not flare them up by detoxing better, then I go up to 2 pills a day for about 2 more weeks. And if that doesn't flare a person up, then I go up to 3 pills 1 time a day. Okay, so that's Methylguard. Okay, now why do you get flared up by improving your detox? Well, what can happen is if you've got this blockage and then you suddenly start taking the nutrients that reverse the blockage, is you got to think of it as you've had a roadblock where all these toxins are hanging out behind the roadblock. And now you open that roadblock up, suddenly all these toxins come running down the road, okay? And they got to be handled by the body. And the body gets overwhelmed and it makes more cytokines. Remember I mentioned my word cytokines? Well, you can get a cytokine flare from detoxing too quickly as well too. So that could flare you up. So you want to start the Methylguard slowly, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, William. Appreciate it. All right, let's see here. Hello, Laura. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Do you find Leptospira to be a co-infection of Lyme? Do you know where I can get tested for this? Are tests reliable? So I'm not familiar, Laura, with that idea that Leptospira may be a part of Lyme. It isn't something I've seen before. Somebody may be postulating that now, but I haven't seen any evidence of it. So I'm not aware of that, okay? So I can't really comment on it. All right, thank you. Hello, Jen. Let's see, is there any correlation between Lyme dementia and omega-3 deficiency? If so, can dementia be reversed? So I haven't seen any studies that look at specifically dementia caused by Lyme. Is there an association with omega-3 deficiency? Okay, so there's no studies that have been done looking at that, okay? But when you get into dementia, an overriding problem with dementia, and this is even in Alzheimer's dementia too, is it's brain inflammation. Okay, so anything that can trigger inflammation in the brain could lead to dementia. That could be mold toxin illness, that could be Lyme, that could be chlamydia pneumoniae infection, it can be toxin exposures. Anything that leads to inflammation could lead to dementia. Okay, so one of the approaches with dementia is to make sure you don't have an infection triggering that. Okay, the other thing is to find other ways of lowering inflammation in the body. So you might try a diet, for instance, of not being on gluten, because gluten can be inflammatory on people. All right. But the other thing, and then you might want to see, does somebody have mold toxin illness, for instance? Okay. But the other things you want to do are to take things that lower inflammation. Right? So you'd want to be on curcumin, for instance, the 500 milligrams 3 times a day. You'd want to be on glutathione, for instance, 500 milligrams once or twice a day. And omega-3 fatty acids decrease inflammation. Okay, so that could be the relationship. Rather than being a deficiency, it is just that if you have more omega-3s, that can lead to decreased inflammation. All right, and so you might do, if you're going to do omega-3 fatty acids, which is fish oil, basically, you want to make sure you're using a brand that is mercury-free. Okay, so you make sure that, because you don't want to put heavy metals in that can make thinking worse if you already have a thinking problem. Okay, so you've got to make sure that the brand of omega-3 fish oil that you're using is mercury-free. All right, and so there are certain companies that do that. We carry a product called Integrative Therapeutics called Eskimo 3 fish oil that is certified as being mercury-free, but just be aware of that, okay? Do not take your omega-3 fish oil that has mercury in it, all right? And so the one thing you want to do then with that is you can take up to about 3,000 milligrams a day, can be useful as an anti-inflammatory, okay? All right, so that may be what the relationship is, Jen. Thank you for that question. Hello, Eric. Hi, Dr. Ross. Do you prescribe Cipro and Levaquin for Lyme? Do you feel like these two damage the mitochondria, or do you feel like your patients tolerate these two meds well? All right. So ciprofloxacin, called Cipro for short, and levofloxacin, let me try that again. Ciprofloxacin is Cipro. Levofloxacin is Levaquin, okay? They're of a family called the fluoroquinolone antibiotics. The fluoroquinolones as a family have one problem, and that is, well, a number of problems, but one of the big problems is that they can lead to tendinitis, inflammation of your tendons, and eventual rupture or breakage of those tendons, okay? Now, it happens, the studies that have been looking at this look at short-term use of those medications, not the months on end that we sometimes use in Lyme. But the reality, I think it happens less than 1% of the time you get a tendinitis on short-term use. I will have to tell you, though, that when I've used it in longer-term use, as I use it as part of Bartonella treatment, not Lyme treatment, but Bartonella treatment, I have in the past had people that have developed a ruptured tendon and even tendinitis. And because of that, I tend to shy away from using it these days. So I will use a Cipro or I will use a Levaquin for Bartonella treatment. I do not think that they have a good role in the treatment of the Lyme germ per se, but they can be useful as part of a Bartonella treatment. But usually I'm going to consider using them for Bartonella only if I really don't have any other recourse or other antibiotics I can use because somebody's had reactions to those antibiotics or they just haven't worked, okay? So if you want to see how I might use those two as part of a Bartonella treatment, let me just show you. I'm going to do a quick screen share here. If you want to see how I'm going to use it to treat Bartonella, take a look at the chapters link here, okay, and then the infection treatment plans. There is an article that I've written here called Kills Bartonella, a Brief Guide. And in here, I break my treatments into 3 different tiers. And as you can see in tier 1, I have fluoroquinolone-based treatments, where I talk about Levaquin and ciprofloxacin, okay? So take a look there, but just realize you got to use caution in using those. Now, the thing that can help prevent the tendon rupture, if you decide that you do, if you really using a Cipro, you want to make sure that you're on high doses of magnesium. It seems that being on magnesium can limit the tendinitis from happening. And I usually have people take about 400 to 600 milligrams a night. I usually like using a magnesium malate or a magnesium citrate. I prefer not to use a sulfate. Magnesium glycine is another option as well too, but those are the various salt forms of magnesium, okay? And I know some of my colleagues will also use vitamin C, because vitamin C strengthens your tendons, or in theory should help strengthen your tendons. I don't know if it really makes a difference or not, but I definitely will use the magnesium, at least 400, 600 milligrams a night. Be aware, if you decide to go out and start using the magnesium, be aware that it can interfere with the absorption of Biaxin and azithromycin if you're on those. So you want to take it at least 2 hours away from those, okay? So just be aware of that. And be aware also that higher doses of magnesium can lead to diarrhea. So if you start getting loose stools, you may need to back down on how much of the magnesium that you take, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Eric. Thank you for that question. Hello, Kobe. I say, hi, Marty. For someone with second type of brain fog, brain function problem, where people can't think, are there certain antibiotics you use to treat the BFP? I like how you've come up with a new acronym for this. This is good. Are there certain antibiotics you use to treat the BFP more so than others? Types of antibiotics, protocol work best with this. Okay. So Kobe, you definitely, so everyone has some degree of cognitive dysfunction or brain fog function in Lyme, to various degrees, okay? And in fact, I forget how quickly it is, but I think it's within a day or two, studies show that the Lyme germ crosses over into the brain, okay? So if you have Lyme, it's in your brain, all right? So now I know some people describe their Lyme as being more neuro-Lyme than others, and I think when somebody says they have neuro-Lyme, what they're trying to say is it's really affected the brain, or they've got Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis Lyme. They have more severe neurologic presentation. But to some degree, most people have Lyme in the brain, all right? Now, I know there are certain antibiotics that get into the brain better than others, but most, even the oral antibiotics, do have the ability to penetrate. Of the ones I like that I think tend to have the better chance, the tetracycline called minocycline is a very fat-soluble antibiotic. Fat-soluble things cross over into the brain better than non-fat-soluble things. And you would want to do that as one pill twice a day, but just keep in mind that sometimes can give dizziness as well too, because it concentrates so much into the brain around the nerves. Because it's fat soluble, it gets into that fat covering on the nerves, and sometimes it becomes an irritant for the nerves, okay? But I do like it because it will get into the brain. Your metronidazole flagells will get in there. Your tenidazoles will get in there. You can use high doses of oral amoxicillin, upwards of about 500 milligram pill, and you would take 3 or 4 of those 3 times a day. That can get into the brain. Any of the IV antibiotics can get into the brain. Or Biaxin can even get in the brain. All these various antibiotics can get in there. So essentially, just make sure you're choosing antibiotics that are going to treat all 3 forms of your Lyme germ, okay? If I had to say, what would I put somebody on that's having more neurologic dysfunction in the brain, I would probably put them on a minocycline and a rifampin to start with. Rifampin, I would use as 300 milligrams, 2 pills 1 time a day. It is useful for treating cyst Lyme, intracellular Lyme, can get into the brain, and then I couple that with minocycline, and I would do the minocycline as 100 milligrams twice a day. That's generally where I would start, okay? Sometimes I will add an amoxicillin on top of that at 3 or 4 pills 3 times a day. I go that high dose of amoxicillin because when you take that much orally, it builds up high levels in the blood that force its way into the brain. Using amoxicillin that way is something called an IV equivalent dose, okay? And then, in addition to killing your germs with something that gets in there, you want to lower cytokines. So you're going to do that curcumin I talked about earlier tonight, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. I would also get on some glutathione because it helps lower cytokines as an antioxidant. But glutathione repairs nerve injury, okay? So you would want to do 5 milliliters of that trifortified glutathione I told you about earlier tonight, okay? And then the other thing sometimes, if you're having a hard time even with antibiotics that can sometimes help with brain function and cognitive dysfunction, is to repair the membrane that makes up the nerve cells, as well as repair the energy factories found in every one of our cells. And those are mitochondria. And the way you repair those and the nerve cell membrane at the same time is you take the fats that make up the mitochondrial energy factory membranes and your nerve cell membranes. And that's use something called NT factor. And you would wind up doing a couple pills 3 times a day for about 2 months, and then you go to 1 pill 3 times a day after that, okay? That repairs the nerve cell membranes and can also repair the energy factories within the nerves to help them start working better too, okay? Now, I've got a lot of this summarized in a few places, so let me go ahead and do a quick screen share so you can come back and look at this in more detail later. All right, so that's the kind of brain fog you're having. Always, if it's severe, consider if you might have Bartonella, okay? Bartonella sometimes can be part of that, okay? So, in terms of the article you might want to take a look at my article called Brain Fog and Lyme Disease. You can fix it. This talks about the things you can do to repair brain and nerve injury. One thing you'll see here in this article, I say, step 1, treat your infections, okay? I even have a link here about how do you figure out if you have Bartonella, for instance, okay? The other one, see if you might have mold toxin illness. And then I go through there's even a video here. I talk about how do you repair with glutathione? How do you use the NT factor, okay? So I've got a bunch of other ideas in there too, but essentially I already told you about that, but feel free to take a look at that later, okay? All right, let me go back here. Oh, Kobe, for the ideas I have about high dose IV equivalent antibiotic, like with amoxicillin, for instance, take a look at the article I've written about antibiotics to use in Lyme. That one is called, good question. I can't remember what I called it. Actually, just Google, when you get over to the Treat Lyme book, there's a search tab at the top. Just write in Lyme antibiotics and you'll find the article that I've written about that, okay? All right. Hello, Elizabeth. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I contracted erythema multiforme as a result of a weakened immune system from Lyme and HHV6. How can I make sure this problem doesn't arise again? I don't have a specific recommendation on that. I mean, the general recommendation I would have for you is treat your germs, all right? So definitely make sure you're treating your Lyme. If your HHV6 is active, you want to do things to get rid of that. You might want to look at the article I have about how do you treat virus infections, okay? The other thing you could do that is more immune support is lower your cytokines with curcumin. Remember, I said I was going to talk about cytokines often, but one of the things that happens with those cytokines, when they're in excess, they suppress your immune system, okay? So you want to make sure you're on the curcumin. Secondly, to boost your immune system, you want to get sleep, at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And if you can't get that, take a look at my sleep articles where I give you a bunch of recommendations to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, whether herbal or prescription, okay? So to boost your immune system, get sleep, lower cytokines, get on an herb that supports your adrenal glands that also supports the immune system called ashwagandha. And I would do that as a 400 milligram pill, 2 pills in the morning, 2 pills between 1 and 2. And then the last thing you may want to consider doing is getting on some mushrooms, a good mix of herbal medicinal mushrooms. For instance, I like using something called the 5 mushroom formula. It's a 1 pill 3 times a day. It's got mushrooms in it, of which those include reishi, reishi gano, maitake, shiitake, cordyceps, I believe, is in it. There's a fifth one that's I'm blanking on right now. But mushrooms can turn on the antiviral as well as anti-Lyme part of your immune system as well, too. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Actually, let me just do a quick screen share here. Chapter. I would take a look at this article called Immune System 101, The Basics, which basically covers the ideas that I was just talking about. Okay? All right. Hello, Rita. Let's see. Treating Lyme for 1 year with herbs only and doing fairly well. Lately, when I lie down in bed, I'm aware of my heart beating. I know Lyme can affect the heart. Is this something to be concerned about? I have no other heart type symptoms. Thank you for what you do. If it is just beating of your heart you're feeling, and if you have normal blood pressure, and if you have a heart rate that is normal, I doubt that this is Lyme related. Okay, those are just my general observations. Now, to help figure that out in more detail, I would need to ask you a lot of questions. Okay, but those are just some general thoughts. Okay, and if you don't have chest pain too. Okay, and if you don't have breathing problems as well. Like I said, I would need to ask you more questions. Just from that brief description you gave me, I doubt if it's a heart problem from Lyme though. Okay, good luck. Hello, Ioana. Let's see. Have you heard about Borrelia Pro? Doctor gave me 3 months supply, one tab 2 times a day. No, I have not heard of that one. I'm not aware of it. Yeah, so I can't make any comments. All right. Hello, Vicky. Let's see. I'm experiencing depression, anxiety, fear, and a feeling of impending doom. Have never felt this kind of thing before. Believe it is caused by Lyme and or co-infections. What can I do to alleviate these symptoms? All right. So when somebody has Lyme that has a psychiatric side to it, or more of a mental health or things in this kind of realm, depression, anxiety, fear, foreboding doom, I think of Bartonella. Okay. So I just want to let you know, I think of Lyme coupled with Bartonella. Even if your BART testing is negative, I would treat for Bartonella. Okay. The problem with Bartonella testing, and I think many of you that have listened to this webinar before know this, there are about 28 different strains of Bartonella, of which 2 are thought to be human strains, and the other ones are thought to be animal strains. However, we can only test for the 2 human strains. All right. And ticks bite animals, and then they eventually bite us, and so what they may be doing is transferring some of those animal Bartonella strains to us that we just don't know to test for, okay? So testing for Bartonella, which only tests for the human strains, may miss the animal strains. So you have to treat for Bartonella if there's a high suspicion for it. And having a lot of mental health kind of issues, like you're describing, suggests Bartonella to me, okay? All right. In terms of helping to alleviate those symptoms, treat your Bartonella and treat your Lyme. All right, number 1. Number 2, get sleep. Number 3, lower your cytokines. Okay, and I've already talked about how to do that tonight. The other thing that you might get some benefit from is to start something called lithium orotate. So it's lithium and then orotate. It's OROTATE. It's a 5 milligram pill. Now, many of you may know about lithium because we use it for bipolar or manic depression illness. But when we use it for those kind of conditions, we usually dose people as adults at 600 to 900 milligrams a day. When we're using it to calm an agitated nervous system, we use it as 5 milligrams 3 times a day. Okay, so 15 milligrams total. That's a lot lower than that 600 to 900 milligrams that we use for psychiatric illnesses. Okay. Now, the rationale behind using lithium is it's an essential mineral that is used to help nerves function better. Okay. And one of the things it does is it improves nerve signaling, or the ability for the nerves to talk to each other. And it can calm agitation down. So you might try it, lithium orotate, 5 milligrams 3 times a day. You can use it as a supplement at that dose, okay? All right. The other thing that you might want to consider doing is, for that kind of agitation, is to get started on, you could do prescription antidepressant medicines, and anything could help with that. Okay, so any of the prescription antidepressant medicines could help, or you could work herbally with herbal antidepressants. If you were to do an herbal antidepressant medicine, I would want to do something that raises a chemical in the brain called serotonin. And the way to do that would be to take something called 5-hydroxytryptophan. Tryptophan is converted into serotonin in the brain. And it usually comes as a 50 milligram dose. So 5-hydroxytryptophan is also called 5-HTP, if you've ever seen that written about before. And you would take it as a 50 milligram pill 3 times a day for about a week. If it's not doing enough, then I'd go up to 100 milligrams 3 times a day, okay? So I would consider lithium. I would consider 5-hydroxytryptophan. I would lower your cytokines. I would get sleep. And I would consider treating for Bartonella as well, given what's happening with you here, okay? And yes, I would cover for Lyme as well, too, especially if we have positive Lyme testing, all right? All right, good luck to you, Vicki. Thank you for that question. Hold on here a minute, everyone. This is Iwana again. So I think you're telling me what's in this compound you asked me about earlier. Okay, so it has in it cistus. Let's see. I'm not even going to try reading some of these words. You know, the main two killers of Lyme that I see in this could be the garlic and might be the oregano. Garlic can sometimes be good. It's not universally effective. Oregano, I think, I don't find much benefit from it at all. I would suggest to you, Anna, that this is a very weak agent in terms of killing Lyme. If you're wanting to go more herbal, I think you can do better. And herbally, what I like using is a mixture of Cemento, which is a product called Cemento, which is cat's claw, and something called Banderol, which is also known as Otoba bark extract. Okay, Otoba is a tree that comes out of South America. Those two products, Banderol and Cemento, come to us out of something called the Cowden Protocol. And although I don't really speak that highly about much of the Cowden Protocol, because I think a lot of the other things that are in the Cowden Protocol actually don't work, but I do think the Banderol Cemento part of the Cowden Protocol does work, all right? And why I decided to look at those is based on some Petri dish experiments that got published about 6 years ago. And those experiments showed that when Lyme is grown on a Petri dish and you expose it to various antibiotics, and then you also expose it to these two herbs, each herb individually did a great job of killing the various forms of the Lyme germ and removed some of a slime layer that Lyme can use to cover itself called a biofilm. When you put the two herbs together, the Banderol Cemento, there was an astronomical whopping kill, huge kill, okay, bigger than you might expect. And those two herbs together got rid of 100% of the slime layer called a biofilm that can cover the Lyme germs. There's nothing else out there experimentally that seems to work better than that, okay? So that got my attention. So I started using those two herbs beginning about 6 years ago. And what I find is that they're very beneficial at helping Lyme about 85 to 90% of the time. That's pretty good, actually. And so I will use them. I think they can work as well in many people as prescription antibiotics can, okay? So it's the products are called Banderol Cemento, or they're known as Otoba bark and cat's claw. I have written an article about them in the Treat Lyme book. You can take a look at that later if you want to know how to dose it. I have it all written down there. But you want to search for it as Otoba, and that's Otoba, and cat's claw, okay? I don't use the brand names in that article, all right? All right. Good luck to you, Owana. Hello, Christine. Let's see. Hi, Marty. Appreciate your webinars. I have a question about glutathione. Should it be taken after taking absorbents to protect the kidneys if detoxing? Hi, Christine. Yeah, I'm getting stumped by your question. Let me think about that for a minute. I've never thought of that, and nor do I do anything like that. And I'm not as sure where that idea comes from, actually. So I can't comment. I'm not aware of that idea or that thinking. And I've been doing this for a number of years. So you've stumped me tonight, but I get stumped periodically in these webinars. So thank you for that question. I don't know how to respond to it. I don't use absorbents. I haven't seen any problem happen in terms of the kidneys when I wind up using glutathione. And so I don't think it's necessary, but I can't comment specifically about that. Okay. All right. Thanks, Christine. Hello, Barbara. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. My 15-year-old is positive for Lyme, Babesia, Mycoplasma, and Sibo. She has finished her second round of rifaximin, or Xifaxan, which is the same as rifaximin, still having gut bloating issues. Should she start an herbal protocol versus a third round of antibiotics? Next, I have to start an antibiotics. UFO, Babesia. Can I begin herb? I think there's a second part here. Hold on a minute. Barbara, I'm not seeing the rest of this. Hold on here a minute. Okay. So in terms of the gassiness and bloating, just an observation, not all that is gassy and bloated is Sibo. Okay, I know that a lot of my colleagues are going down the Sibo pathway these days. But keep in mind that also it's possible to develop too many yeast in the intestines, which can give a lot of gassiness and bloating too. And so symptoms of yeast overgrowth can include sugar cravings, gassiness and bloating after eating, vaginal itching, vaginal discharge. Sometimes people that have too many yeast will also develop increased acne or skin rashes. And that's because toxin that gets released by too many yeast in the intestines interacts with the skin, leading to acne occur more easily, or also leading to rashes occurring more easily as well too, okay? Also, sometimes people with a yeast overgrowth will have white patches in their mouth, or they might have difficulty swallowing and feel like things get caught in the throat. So I would definitely want to make sure, consider if there could be too many yeast, and if so, they should be treated, okay? Yeah, I guess that's about all I can say on this, because I'm not seeing the rest of your question here to be able to respond any further than that. All right. Okay. Sorry about that, Barbara. Hello, Carolina. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Started taking doxycycline 3 months ago for chronic Lyme. Added grapefruit seed extract a month ago. Is this an effective combination for all forms of Lyme? Some symptoms have improved, some continue. Can we start pulse dosing 4 days on, 3 off, or should we continue with daily treatment? So in terms of treating Lyme, Caroline is raising a good point, and I mentioned earlier tonight too, there's 3 forms of Lyme germ, right? So there's the spirochete, corkscrew looking thing. You see that on the internet. That's the Lyme picture you see on the internet, okay? And then there is a form of the germ that lives inside of cells. We call that intracellular Lyme. And then there's a microscopic cyst form of the germ, okay? And we think you need to treat all 3 forms. At least that's what our experience tells us, okay? So the doxycycline gets inside of your cells, and it blocks the protein production of intracellular Lyme. So it treats intracellular Lyme. The doxycycline also gets inside the spirochete, which is a big cell after all, and it limits its protein production, so it treats the spirochete, okay? Grapefruit seed extract is a good anti-cyst agent. So yeah, you've got yourself covered. You've covered all three forms of the germ, okay? In terms of pulse dosing, so the idea behind pulse dosing has to do with a more recent, although it's been done for a while, there's a more recent study that shows why it might be a good idea to pulse dose antibiotics, but I will tell you, it doesn't always work, okay? So there, about, I think a little over a year and a half or 2 years ago now, there were researchers out of Northeastern University in Boston that were researching an idea that some people have thought about for a while in Lyme, and that is that one of the reasons that people with Lyme, they have a hard time recovering is that their germs, when exposed to antibiotics on an ongoing basis, might assume what is called a persister cell state or become a persister cell, okay? So there's spirochetes, there's intracellular Lyme, there's cyst. Persisters are not a fourth form, okay? What they are is they're a form of a spirochete, and they're a form of a cyst. So when you use antibiotics continuously, some people wondered, could some of the spirochetes become persister spirochetes, and could some of the cysts become persister cyst, okay? So it's just another way that the cyst lives, for instance, or the spirochete lives, for instance, okay? And essentially what happens with a persister cell is the germ slows its metabolism way, way down, effectively going into hibernation, going into deep sleep, where the antibiotics, it just ignores them. It doesn't care, okay? So we've wondered if that could happen in Lyme. We know it can happen in leprosy. We know it can happen in tuberculosis. But we really hadn't been able to recreate that happening in Lyme, but we wondered if it could happen in Lyme. So the researchers at Northeastern University were able to show on Petri dish experiments that when those Petri dishes were exposed to continuous antibiotics, that about 20% of the spirochetes and about 20% of the cyst assumed a persister state. Okay, so then they started wondering, well, what can they do about this? So in the experiments, they decided to start and stop the antibiotics. In other words, pulse the antibiotics, okay? Now, in the lab, that can be pretty controlled, right? So in a lab, when they decide to stop the antibiotics, they can stop them right away. And the way they stop them is they literally wash the antibiotic off the Petri dish. They get it off right away, okay? Now, keep in mind, we in humans, if we stop taking something orally, that antibiotic is still going to be in us maybe for another day or two, so we can't wash things out of us that quickly, all right? But what they found on these Petri dish experiments is that after 24 hours, the persister cells would change back into the active spirochete, back into the active cyst form of the germ, where they would start to respond to the antibiotics again. So what they did in the experiments then is they tried to see how many times should they start and stop before they might get rid of it. And what they showed is that by 4 times of starting and stopping the antibiotics, they wiped out every one of the Lyme germs. They were gone, completely gone, okay? So that gives us some rationale for why it might be a good idea to do pulsing, so that maybe we can prevent or deal with germs that go into a persister form. No one has done human experiments looking at pulsing to see if it makes a difference, though, okay? They just don't exist. I will go ahead and experiment with pulsing, and what I do is I usually will do a 4-day on, 3-day off. I take the 3 days off because I want to make sure I got a good chance for the antibiotics to get out. And with this regimen, yeah, you could do a 4-day on, 3-day off. Keep in mind, for those of you that are on Zithromax, Zithromax is not an antibiotic that you pulse. And the reason is it never gets out of you, all right? Because Zithromax has what's known as a long half-life. That's the amount of time it takes for it to get out of you. Because of a long half-life, it can take Zithromax 7 days to get completely out of you. So I see people on these regimens where their doctors are using Zithromax 1 day on, then take a day off, then go on for another day. So what? They're using Zithromax continuously in the person. I mean, it's in them continuously, okay? Or they'll do Zithromax for 4 days on, 3 days off. Well, guess what? In those 3 days they're off, they're still on Zithromax because the stuff doesn't get out of you that quickly, okay? So when we pulse, we have to be careful with the antibiotics we use to pulse. And of the ones that are generally used in the world of Lyme, the only one you really should not pulse is Zithromax, even though I see a number of my colleagues do it, and it just absolutely makes no sense, okay? The other point I want to make about pulsing is it's probably something that might be good for Lyme, but I would not do it in somebody that has active Bartonella with their Bartonella antibiotics, and I would not do it with Babesia antibiotics, okay? Keep in mind, Bartonella replicates every 24 hours. So if you stop an antibiotic and you take a 3-day holiday, guess what happens during that time? It all grows back. It makes no sense to pulse dose a Bartonella antibiotic, okay? Babesia, same kind of issue, okay? Lyme, on the other hand, replicates slowly. By some estimates, maybe every 4 weeks it replicates. So in those days that you're off, it is not rapidly growing back and taking back over again. So do not pulse for Bartonella. Do not pulse for Babesia. I know one of my colleagues out in Washington, D.C., Dr. Jemsek does. I just don't get it. And in fact, I see a number of his patients where I wind up then pursuing persistent treatment, and we are able to clean up their Bartonella or Babesia if his Palsy regimens haven't worked, because I think they fail because of that as an issue, okay? So it just does not make rational sense to me, and I haven't seen a rational explanation for it out of Dr. Jemsek as well either, okay? I don't mean to bash him. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to me, okay? Yeah, this is a regimen you could pulse. Now, I will also tell you, there's been some competing research done on Petri dishes by Dr. Zhang out of Johns Hopkins. Zhang is a researcher that is starting to do a lot of work looking at Petri dish experiments in his laboratory. And he's looking at what are the best antibiotic combinations that you would use to deal with persisters. And what his work is saying is that pulsing does not help. And in fact, what you want to do, his research is showing, is that there are certain antibiotic combinations that will work well on persisters, but you don't want to pulse them. So for instance, the combination of either cefuroxime or ceftriaxone, one or those two, coupled with Bactrim, which is a sulfa antibiotic, coupled with doxycycline, is a good persister combination on a Petri dish. But again, you don't pulse it, you use it continuously. And I've started using that a little bit, and I'm finding some benefit. So my rule of thumb with pulsing is make sure you're using an antibiotic that will get out of you during the time you're off, okay? Don't pulse for Bartonella. Do not pulse for Babesia. And I think a reasonable way to pulse for Lyme is a 4-day on, 3-day off. And the only way to know if it's going to help you is try it. There's some people that do a lot better with that kind of pulse regimen, and there are some people that just do horribly on that kind of a pulse regimen, okay? So good luck to you on that. Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. You're welcome. All right, let's see. So I wanted just to be thrown, and I told everyone tonight I would not take more than one per person, but I just want to finish up because this is part of your earlier questions. So in terms of non-prescription antibiotic ways to manage Lyme, I did mention the Banderol Cemento that I just talked to you about in your last question. Silver, which is Argentin 23, colloidal silver, can kill germs. Do I think it's really a universally effective way? No. I do think it helps some people, but I only think it helps about 20% of the time. I think you'd do better if you want to go natural looking at the Banderol Cemento, okay? The other thing you got to be careful about with your colloidal silvers is that over time, they might accumulate in your skin, leading to blue man syndrome. Literally, you look blue. It gets in your skin. You can't get it out. Once you turn blue, you will stay blue. And you can see people, I see them in my waiting room periodically, that did a lot of colloidal silver. They have a blue tinge to them. And I can tell. I don't even have to ask them. I do ask them, but I can tell. You've done colloidal silver. So you've got to be careful. There's a lifetime max on how much you can use, okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Lisa. Let's see. What are the benefits of stevia in treatment of Lyme? What standard dosage do you recommend? Should it be taken apart from the antibiotics? Thank you for all you do to help us. It is so appreciated. You're welcome. All right. So I tried the stevia based on research that came out about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I'm actually not impressed with it. I don't use it anymore. Okay. But let me tell you what the theory is behind it. So Eva Choppy is a researcher. Her last name is spelled SAPI. She's a PhD. She's probably running one of the more novel, innovative Lyme disease research labs in the country right now. And she's doing a lot of bench science, meaning petri dish experiments, okay, and test tube experiments. So not human experiments, but more petri dish and test tube experiments. And she has done work looking at stevia. What she's been able to show on her petri dishes is that stevia can help remove biofilms. She's also done some research showing that stevia might help treat persister Lyme as well too. And they're impressive studies, actually. The problem is when I use it in people, I just don't think I don't think it gets absorbed out of the intestines to work. I've even wound up using really, really high doses, like even 20 or 30 drops twice a day, and I still don't see benefit from it. So I'm not that hopeful, or I don't use it anymore because I don't think it's works well. Okay, so keep in mind what happens in a petri dish is not a human. Okay, it's a petri dish. All right, so we have to see. We can use petri dish experiments to get ideas and test tube experiments to get ideas, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen in our laboratory inside of us. We're different than a petri dish, all right? So the reality is I don't think that this stuff works that well in a living human being, okay? All right, thanks for that question. Let's see. Let's see. Hello, Lisa. I'm wondering if this is the same Lisa, but we'll take a second one here. Let's see. Hi. Your help means so much to all of us. You're welcome. My question this evening. Oh, so this is a new question. Okay, so you must be a different Lisa then. My question this evening is: do you think it is a waste of time to treat Lyme before treating and or looking into mold, parasites, and heavy metals first? No, quite the opposite. So mold. Well. So in general, unless I've got, for most people, I think it makes more sense to go after the Lyme first. Okay. And the reason is when you look at these illnesses, Lyme disease, and the things that contribute to Lyme disease, there's the effect of the Lyme germ, there's the effect of the co-infections, there can be the effect of all the excess cytokines created by having them. There may be the effect of environmental toxins, heavy metals. There may be the effect of mold, parasite infections. But basically, when we look at what Lyme disease is, it's a total load phenomenon illness, meaning there's many things collectively that add together to create the illness, okay? And you don't need to fix everything. You just need to fix the right things, all right? And what I have found in years of doing this is the thing that makes the most sense and you get the biggest bang for the buck is going after your Lyme and your co-infections, dealing with sleep, getting your cytokines knocked down, correcting your adrenals and thyroid, getting yeast knocked out if they're there. Those are the places you start, okay? Now, I sometimes will go beyond that. I usually won't look to do these issues that you're raising until about 6 to 9 months into a treatment if everything else isn't working, okay? But if I've got somebody that comes to see me and I take their history and they say, I was doing great until I moved into this house that was full of black mold. Well, guess what? I'm going to start with black mold first, okay? Because even if I test them for Lyme and it comes back positive, they were in a house that they got worse with black mold. The chances are it's probably the black mold that is their bigger problem, not the Lyme, okay? So there are certain situations where I might go after these other problems if I can clearly tell from the history that it's probably the other problems that are the major leading cause. But for the most part, most people's bigger problems is the Lyme germ and the mess it creates, okay? So let me show you my approach on this. I'm just going to do a quick screen share here. Just going to show you something so you can get a better sense of this. I have a chapter called About Lyme Disease. And one of the articles I have is this diagram that I created called What is Lyme Disease? A Mess of Things. You'll have to look at it on your computer later, okay? But basically, it basically has a diagram of everything that contributes to the mess. And then I make this argument that you don't need to fix all of them. You just need to fix certain ones of them, okay? So what steps do I think should be taken first, all right? And so to do that, take a look at my treatment protocol called the Successful Treatment Recipe. And you can see the various steps that I think are important, okay? Number one, get sleep. And I can give you some ideas on how to do that. There's many other ways to get sleep, but these are some to consider. Number two, get on a paleo diet, especially right at the beginning. And I talk about that here. Number three, lower cytokines. I mentioned that earlier tonight. Number four, be on an adaptogen, something that helps your body deal with stress. Correct your hormonal problems if they're there. Be on a good multivitamin. Get yeast out. Treat your Lyme infection. Do some basic detox work. Treat your co-infections. Okay, those are kind of the initial steps. All right, now, all the way down here, part 13 of my treatment protocol is special considerations for 6 months and beyond. All right, this is when the basic steps of killing your germs aren't working. It's at this point you start looking for some of the issues you raised. Okay, you'll see if you look through here. These are the additional steps that you take if everything else isn't working first. Okay, all right. That is just how I have found to be the most successful way of going after this, okay? And thank you for that question. Hello, Barbara C. Thank you, Dr. Marty. You're welcome. I was diagnosed in March. My daughter has symptoms and had Bell's palsy. I was told by 2 docs that Bell's is a classic symptom of Lyme. Can you say more about that? So Bell's palsy involves the infection of a nerve that makes your face muscles work, okay? And if it becomes infected, it stops working correctly, and it can result in your eyes staying open. You can't close it. You'll start having loss of the ability to use one side of your mouth. You get some drooping of the face on one side. That's a Bell's palsy. Now, Lyme can be a cause of that. Another infection that can be a cause of it is herpes, as in herpes type 1, which is the oral herpes, and even the genital herpes, if you happen to get it up orally, can sometimes cause this nerve problem as well too, okay? And you don't even need to have a herpes outbreak to have it affect the nerve, okay? So it could be either one of those, actually. So the Bell's palsy could have been Lyme, could also be human HSV, herpes simplex virus, or maybe a combination of both, all right? Now, when you get Bell's palsy, just a word about Bell's palsy, when you look at the literature about what seems to have the best benefit, you know, it's not the drugs. I mean, if you go to the emergency room, they're going to put you on steroids, which you should not do if you have Lyme, but they're going to want to put you on steroids, okay? You don't want to do that if you have Lyme because steroids suppress the immune system, allowing Lyme to get more active. And they may even want to put you on a Valtrex or an antivirus agent. But actually, what has the best chance of helping you over time is acupuncture, believe it or not. The studies say that getting regular acupuncture for a Bell's palsy is what will turn it around in most people. All right? So I would just point that out, okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Debbie. Let's see. Does band 41 mean you have Lyme? No, it does not. It means you could, but it doesn't by itself. It does not. Okay. So what is Debbie's question about here, everyone? So as many of you know, that the test that most of us like to use to diagnose Lyme, to look for laboratory evidence of Lyme, is a test called a Western blot. And what a Western blot does is it looks to see, is your immune system making antibodies that attach to certain proteins found on the covering of the Lyme germ? And when we test to see if you have antibodies against a protein, we identify the protein that we're testing you to see if you have antibodies against based on what it weighs, all right? And there is a protein that weighs 41 kilodaltons. Kilodalton is a microscopic unit of weight, or we sometimes call that band 41. Now, you can have antibodies on band 41 as part of your Lyme, but having just band 41 by itself may not necessarily mean Lyme. That is because if you ever have germs in you, other germs that have gotten into you, and they may be gone now, that happen to have a tail on them, or a flagella, a tail, Those tails usually have a protein similar to the Lyme protein, and if you've made antibodies against those other germ tails, those antibodies may cross-attach to the Lyme protein band 41. All right, so you don't want to use it just by itself. All right, that's why. Thanks for that question, Debbie. Hello, Patty. Let's see. My toes are really numb. The ball of the foot is numb, but not as much as the toes. The heel is kind of numb, but not as much as the ball of the foot. Is this Bartonella? Patty, it could be part of Lyme. It could be part of Bartonella. That's where I would start to look. It could be either one. If you're trying to see if it could be Bartonella, take a look at my article called "It Could Be Bartonella or Babesia: The Signs and Symptoms." Read through that. See if you have enough symptoms that suggest you might have Bartonella. And if you do, then consider treating for Bartonella. Okay, but yeah, it could be. The other thing you might want to do is take the steps that to repair those nerves, which involves using the NT factor I mentioned earlier, using glutathione that I mentioned earlier, and also possibly using something called coenzyme Q10. Let me show you two articles. We're starting to get later here in the webinar, so rather than going through all this, I'm just going to show you the articles that you can look at later on your own. All right, so you want to look at the chapter called Brain and Nerves. And in terms of fixing your neuropathy, read this one called Neuropathy Repair, Heal That Tingling, Numbness, and Pain. Okay? All right, and then in terms of how do you diagnose Bartonella, take a look at my chapter called, there should be one on how to diagnose. It's right here. And you want to look at the article called "It Could Be Bartonella or Babesia: The Symptoms and Signs" right here. Okay? All right. You. Hello, Jen. Let's see. Is there any correlation? Oh, we already answered that one earlier. Hello, Barbara. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I have a 13-year-old with a tick removed 6 days after the bite. She had nausea and headaches that went away when started Doxy and Tindamax. I think that's what you mean by Tindy. It's been 6 weeks. Should she continue or start astragalus and Japanese knotweed and cat claw? Thank you. Okay, so if I'm seeing this correctly, let's see. The 13 with a tick removed 6 days after the bite. Okay, so in acute Lyme, if you use antibiotics and if you use them for 3 to 4 weeks, what the studies tell us is that 90% of people are cured by doing that, as long as you start your antibiotics within the first month after the bite. Okay, and that's what it appears that you did here. Okay, there's 10% of people that go on to develop chronic Lyme. Okay, but usually 4 weeks is going to be enough, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You've done 6 weeks here. If she's been pretty much symptom-free since you started using the antibiotics, I think you could stop the antibiotics at this point. I don't even think you necessarily need the astragalus, the knotweed, or the cat's claw. I think you probably have knocked it out entirely. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Barbara. Hello, Leah. Let's see. Wondering why one might experience at least 5 or 6 times a day a feeling of having low blood sugar levels, cold sweating, heart beating, nausea feeling. The only thing is that when tested, the blood sugar levels fall into normal range. Is there any sort of explanation for this with Lyme? So it is possible you're getting relative hypoglycemia, meaning you're getting blood sugar drops, okay? And even if they're in normal range, you may still be experiencing relative hypoglycemia. we'll see a picture like that in adrenal fatigue, where the adrenals are having a hard time operating, okay? And so signs of adrenal fatigue can be symptoms like you're having, also having a lot of afternoon crashing compared to the morning, sometimes having a lot of dizziness on standing can be part of what adrenal fatigue looks like. The other thing that can look a lot like this is if you get yeast overgrowth. It can trigger an adrenal fatigue looking picture, okay? And I already talked earlier tonight about how to diagnose yeast. There is a whole article. I have a chapter called Yeast. If you need to know how to diagnose yeast, take a look in there, okay? But I would consider getting on some ashwagandha, a 400 milligram pill, 2 pills in the morning, 2 pills between 1 and 2. That can often help with this relative hypoglycemic episodes that you're having, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Leon. Hello, Mike. Let's see. I'm on Malarone and Doxy for babesia. Do these also help with Lyme? So the Malarone has 2 chemicals in it, something called a tovaquone and a quinine derivative called plaquenil, or proquinil, excuse me. Those 2 chemicals together are great for babesia. They are not helpful for Lyme, okay? The doxycycline that you're on can treat Lyme. A more effective dose for adults would be 2 100 milligram pills twice a day for a total of 400 milligrams in a day. So 200 milligrams 2 times a day would be a more effective dose, okay? And you would want to be on something that's going to treat the cyst form of the Lyme germ. And so Doxy is going to treat spirochete Lyme and intracellular Lyme, but it's not going to do anything for the cyst form. What can help you with the cyst form would be something like grapefruit seed extract. I mentioned it earlier tonight, 250 milligrams 2 times a day, okay? Now, I know some of my colleagues think Malarone helps with cysts. We don't have any science behind that. And my experience says I don't quite think so. I usually like to add something that is more targeted at cyst as compared to the Malarone, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Mike. Hello, Oscar. Let's see. Can Bartonella or Lyme damage shoulder, spine, or facet joints? And also, simplest test for Lyme and Bartonella relapse. So I would not think of Bartonella as damaging a joint, okay? Lyme, on the other hand, could lead to some destruction of the cartilage that is inside the joint. So Lyme possibly can, but I wouldn't think of Bartonella as doing that. And unfortunately, there is not a good test for relapse in either Lyme or Bartonella. We have to look at what the clinical picture tells us. There just is not a good test on a relapse. Good luck to you. Hello, Patrick. Let's see. Hi, doctor. Hello, Patrick. Let's see. Thank you for sharing your time. Is there danger for developing gallstones or gallbladder problems with taking long-term antibiotics? I'm having right abdomen pain. So the one antibiotic that can lead to more gallstone or easy gallstone formation is the IV antibiotic called ceftriaxone, also known as Rocephin. And that is because it thickens up the bile, which is the fluid that flows out of your liver into the gallbladder. It makes it thicker, and therefore it's easier for stones to form, okay? There aren't any other antibiotics that I'm aware that cause that to happen. However, there is a relationship with Lyme and gallstone disease, though, or gallbladder disease, and that is we know that Lyme can live in the gallbladder. And so it is possible to have inflammation of the gallbladder without having gallstones secondary to having the Lyme infection, all right? So just to be aware of that, okay? You wouldn't treat it any differently other than you might not be on your ceftriaxone if you're having gallbladder problems. You would still use similar antibiotics and approaches that I've outlined here tonight, okay? All right. Let's see here. Hello, Matthew. See, hi, Dr. Ross. How common is having Bartonella by itself? I'm being treated for just Bartonella and rifampin and clarithromycin. If I do have Bartonella, when might I start to feel better? Okay, so your Bartonella treatment is also a full Lyme treatment. So you're being covered for both, okay? So that rifampin is like one of my favorite agents to use for Bartonella. It can sometimes even get rid of Bartonella on its own. But often getting rid of Bartonella is better handled if you use 2 antibiotics at the same time. And that clarithromycin is helping for the Bartonella. Okay, then from a Lyme standpoint, rifampin treats the cyst form of Lyme, probably picks up intracellular Lyme. And then the clarithromycin treats spirochete Lyme as well as intracellular Lyme. So you happen to be treating both, okay? Now, the Lyme germ, if you happen to have Lyme, often will respond slowly to treatment. And if we look at studies about how quickly people start getting better for the Lyme germ portion of things, there was an unpublished study that was presented at ILADS, the National Lyme Disease Meeting, about 7 or 8 years ago. Now, it's been a while. But at that, the researchers showed in the study that by 3 months of treatment, there were people started having only 30% of people by 3 months had notable improvement. By 6 months, 60% had notable improvement. And by 9 months, 90% of people had notable improvement. Okay. They just started noticing improvement. Okay. So it can take time for Lyme to turn around. Bartonella, on the other hand, if you're on a treatment regimen that's working, and this one is a regimen that will work about 85% of the time. When you have Bartonella, by 1 to 2 months, you should start seeing significant improvement in the Bartonella symptoms, okay? And usually a BART treatment is going to be 4 to 6 months, okay? All right, total time. All right. Now, can you have Bartonella by itself? Yeah, I have people that get Bartonella by itself. And a big clue, even if I think Lyme might be there, is the rapid turnaround. So, for instance, if I'm targeting Lyme and BART and somebody is completely well within 4 to 6 months, probably that was Bartonella was their whole problem. Keep in mind, just having a positive Lyme test does not mean Lyme is causing your problem. It just means it could be causing your problem, okay? So I have to keep that in mind as well, too. All right. Good luck to you, Matthew. Thank you for that question. All right, everyone. I got through a lot of questions, and I know there's a number of ones still here, but I'm just not going to be able to get through all of them tonight. It was good visiting with you tonight. I enjoyed doing this after taking the last couple of weeks off. Look in your email tomorrow. You'll see an email from me somewhere between 6 and 6:30 in the morning Seattle time, which will have links to the recording of tonight's webinar, as well as we'll have a sign up for next week's webinar. In a second here, I will transfer you from here over to the Treat Lyme book at treatlyme.net. Take a look around there, and even from there, you can sign up for next week's webinar as well, too. So good night, everyone. It's good visiting with you, and take care. I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.